Hello, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. I'm going to have a little chat later in a minute when Daniel Clark from South Africa might join. I think he'll join us in a few minutes, and then we can talk about situation in South Africa and compare it to the Netherlands. And I have some topics prepared a little bit. I got my laptop over here with some topics we might discuss. Then we can do a sort of a multi-guest. All right. How are you doing, Daniel?
Hi, Johannes. Good in yourself.
Hi. Good evening. Uh, so we had a little chat a while back, I suppose. We had a little discussion about the situation in South Africa. I thought we could just have a little casual chat. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is Daniel Clark from South Africa, and we can talk about various things and so on. And then maybe later we'll bring on some other guests for a wider debate or so.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
So
And how do you generally run your lives, Johannes? So would you let people of say other races on and
Uh,
debate with them?
yeah, I never really thought about it. I thought we would just speak to our own people. I'm a bit tired of fighting the lefties, so to speak, when we should be able to talk more, let's say, uh,
Amongst our
constructive
own?
debates. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I feel the same. I find debates with people of other races are fruitless. They never really go anywhere. So yeah,
All right. Exactly. It's a bit over the top. Yeah.
yeah.
So I see a lot of enemies already in the comments, but I think we can just ignore those largely because why shouldn't we just have some smart conversations about stuff? But by the way, I was wondering something like I live around sea level, and what about you guys? Do you live on some kind of elevation, high up in the mountains, or also down in the valleys?
Yeah, I'm pretty high up where I am. I'm about 1,300 meters or so above sea level. So I'm in the mountains. Yeah,
All right, cool.
yeah,
'Cause,
yeah. But most of Holland is pretty much at sea level or below sea level, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
it's like it's sea level. Like half the country is like clay or soil, so it floods very often. Yeah, in the western part of the Netherlands is and parts of it are indeed like below sea level.
okay.
I heard that like when the first South Africans arrived, meaning when the first Europeans got to South Africa, a lot of them moved up to the mountains because it was just too hot down
Yeah,
below.
yeah, yeah. Especially in the coastal regions, it's very humid and hot. Yeah. So a lot of them moved inland to the higher areas to have a more similar climate to Europe, I guess, especially in the winters.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh, and recently I've been traveling around a little bit, like in Hamburg in Germany. It's like a harbor city, and I thought it was like a really strange experience when you arrive there at Central Station. It's like uh, you're a white minority, which is strange, and then when you walk around the neighborhood next to it, it's like you have a whole section that is just Arab and Turkish. Every shop has like Arab names and Turkish names, and I wonder, like, for you guys in South Africa, is are most of your cities like that as well, or is it like do you have like areas for where the white people go or something?
Yeah, yeah. We still whites pretty much keep to their own areas. So as soon as an area becomes too diverse, let's say it that way, then whites move out and they find a new area that's predominantly white. Until that area gets overtaken as well. So we see the same white flight all across South Africa. We just have smaller and smaller areas to go to. And yeah, but I mean, once upon a time, every city and every town was all white. And now all these cities and towns, they've already been renamed. So it's essentially like a soft conquering that's happened, you know? All the cities and towns that used to have white Afrikaans or English names, are now going by different names. I mean, the white folk don't really call them those names, but yeah, they've been renamed nonetheless.
Oh, right. Yeah, they do that here as well. Occasionally, we hear about in the news or some street name or so has been changed into something more diverse, so to speak. Like you imagine you have something like Peter Stuyvesant Street or something, and they change it into like Nelson Mandela Street or so, right?
Yeah,
Is it
exactly. Pretty much every major city in South Africa now is a Nelson Mandela Street. So
uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's great when your street names become named after a terrorist. Yeah,
right, right. Communist terrorists, yeah.
yeah.
Uh, what is the story about Nelson Mandela? What is the story that you hear in South Africa versus what you think it is like?
Well, I mean, there's the version of Nelson Mandela that the news and the media basically portrays, which is the same version you guys got internationally, that he's this freedom fighter, this peaceful man. They forget to tell you about all of his involvement with the military wing of the ANC and how he was literally involved in setting off bombs that killed innocent civilians. Sorry, I don't know, that unalived innocent civilians. Let's say it that way, so we don't get on TikTok's radar. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't describe it on TikTok or you get another strike here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if you know about Nelson Mandela's wife, Winnie Mandela. She was quite ruthless herself. So in the late 80s up until the early 90s, there were black political parties that didn't agree with the ANC's way of going about their political struggle. And so, what Winnie Mandela and her cronies did is they would unalive these other blacks who they viewed as competitors, political competitors. And it's perhaps something for your international viewers to look into, necklacing. So, it basically entails they would take a tire and set it alight around the people's necks, and they would literally melt into the ground in a slow death. So they
Horrible.
they they killed hundreds of people that way, and yeah, they would also unalive any black people that they saw as collaborators with the apartheid government. So black policemen, black council members, because I don't think international people realize this, but black people basically had their infrastructure set up for them in their homeland areas by the white government, and they would appoint their own people to basically police them, run their councils, their clinics, etc. So the ANC, when they came to power, or just before they came to power, they saw these people as apartheid collaborators that needed to be unalived. So yeah, they would do it in the most ruthless way possible. So yeah.
Is it like the black people who are in charge of this ANC, or like your main party? Is that a specific tribe of black people who took over, or is it like a hodgepodge of many different ancestries or so? Or
Yeah, it's a hodgepodge of many different ones, but there are two main factions, the Xhosas and the Zulus. So those are the two biggest tribal factions in South Africa. And they have disagreements amongst themselves. So they're not one united bloc as people tend to see them. They have agreements amongst the two main tribes, like the Xhosas and the Zulus. The president of the ANC will say be a Zulu for one term, and then they'll say, okay, no, it's the Xhosa's turn now, and then there will be a Xhosa who will be leader of the ANC. Like, for instance, Nelson Mandela was a Xhosa, and then the guy who came after him, Thabo Mbeki, was also a Xhosa, I think, and then Jacob Zuma, who came after him, was a Zulu again. So they have to kind of, amongst themselves, they agree to rotate it. So yeah.
all right, so let's see. Khoisan Zulu, are those like natives from there? Or what about the Bantu black people? What's their role in South Africa, really?
Yeah, well, look, the Bantus, our white history, right, tells us the actual recorded history tells us that Bantus migrated down from Central and Western Africa over a long period of time, right? It was essentially like this long migration that they call a drift, where they would displace other tribes or smaller factions of Bantu tribes that had broken off and splintered off. They would get displaced by this main Bantu migration. Um, Black folk will contest this and say, no, that didn't happen. But unfortunately, there's no recorded history from their side to prove anything otherwise. So, yeah, it's pretty much the people you see in South Africa at the moment are people who weren't actually native from the country. They migrated downwards from Central Africa. The folk who were native here, who were here when the Dutch and the British arrived here, the Khoisan, they look more like a Bushman type people. You know, you've probably seen that movie, The Gods Must Be Crazy, with the little Bushman.
No, I haven't seen it. Is that
Yeah.
recent or?
No, it's quite an old movie. Came out, I think, in the late 80s or so, but it was, yeah, quite famous internationally. So if you want to go look at that, and those were the main people who occupied the southern region of South Africa around the Cape of Good Hope, and yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'll check it out. So, what was the name again? Gods of the.
The Gods Must Be Crazy. It's like
Oh,
a
Gods of the
comedy.
Crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
There was another documentary I saw about Africa. What was it? This Chinese presence in Africa, about how they basically take over all the businesses. I
Yeah.
forgot the name.
Isn't it Empire of Dust or something like that?
Empire of Dust. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Did you see that one?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I've seen that, where that Chinese man gets so frustrated with the blacks. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's a whole section in that movie about how the infrastructure that Europeans left behind was like train rails and so on, electricity poles, was more modern than what they had in China. So the Chinese people, they see that being deteriorating, right, left behind, and they're just angry at the black people. Like, you could have had this before we
Yeah.
had it, and you just messed it up. I thought that was really telling about the situation in Africa.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the same thing all across Africa. I mean, in the early 20th century and late 19th century, there were railways built all over Africa by colonial powers. You know, whether it be the British or the Belgians or the French or the Portuguese. So all these countries basically got European infrastructure, and after all the colonizing factions left the areas, everything just decayed to nothing again. It just, yeah,
Yeah.
they, they simply can't upkeep it. That's the thing. These people were
Right,
not
right.
responsible for any of these inventions, so I don't think they have the know-how or understanding to maintain it even.
Right. Well, I suppose so, because this kind of technology is like transferred from the West, from Europe to them. And you can say, okay, we can educate anyone to do it, but maybe there's simply no desire to even acquire the skills for maintenance, because they're basically they're like pursuing a different path, right? You can't force them to think and act European or so. Uh, I think therefore a lot of education attempts are just so and so. It doesn't really improve them that much. Do you think that the blacks are going to learn to like maintain their civilization in South Africa?
Um, no, unfortunately, I don't believe they will. So I think a major hindrance to them is IQ.
Right.
Which I believe to be predominantly genetic, right? So there's a very small part of IQ which may be environmental, but the major portion of any race's IQ is genetic. So that's the problem. You may have a very small percentage of outlier African people who are capable of becoming engineers and doctors, but the vast majority of them are not. So I simply do not see that they'll have enough people of high enough levels to be able to run those kinds of systems and infrastructure. And
Right.
whereas with a population like the Asians, for instance, it's definitely possible. They're a high IQ population, so they may not have the creative faculties that Europeans have amongst the Asians. That's why they don't invent as much. But they definitely are capable of maintaining these systems or reverse engineering them once they've been invented because they have high IQs. So, yeah.
Right, and of course, the ones you educate, once they can actually be, some of them can be doctors and so on, then they'll just get better pay in the West or so. They'll just move out, I suppose. So then
Yeah, well,
education helps them escape.
exactly. What you find with the outlier Africans is they try get out of Africa as quickly as they can because generally there's a very tribalistic mindset amongst Africans. They don't like the outliers. The outliers kind of hold up a mirror to their culture, which they don't like, and generally they're not well received. So what you'll see even in South Africa is the outlier Africans who are of higher intelligence, who went to university, they try to live amongst whites.
Hmm. Right,
They
yeah,
try,
of course.
yeah,
They'll
yeah,
just upgrade themselves. Yeah, during my recent trip in Hamburg, I noticed that cities like Bremen and Hamburg and so on, they have started to deteriorate a lot. Like they don't clean up graffiti anymore, and that alone gives the whole city a sort of very bad vibe. Like they're failing to do their own upkeep, and like Hanover as well. Seth says, and you notice that it feels almost in Germany as though the authorities have just given up on maintaining their cities. So I feel the way it felt to me moving through those cities was like, wow, we're deteriorating in a way, while at the same time certain neighborhoods are being completely taken over by different groups. Like one neighborhood is like Arab or Turkish, another neighborhood can be Indian, for example, right? And some other parts are more African already, and no one is even caring about those diverse neighborhoods. But even the supposedly nicer neighborhoods are being trashed, really. And I feel like,
yeah.
is that some kind of process that you also saw in South Africa? Like when you mentioned the upkeep problem, how is it in your cities? Is it like a sense of constant decline and no resolve, no change?
Yeah, definitely. And it's a thing that I believe is tied to demographics. So as the demographics change, the more they change, the more you notice the decline. So, for instance, here in South Africa, when the government got handed over to the ANC and they won the first so-called democratic election here, um, it took a good while for the towns and the cities to start deteriorating because the bigger part of the black population still remained in their homeland areas. They slowly started migrating to the formerly white cities and towns. But it wasn't really until probably about the early 2000s that you started noticing a big difference in the standards and the infrastructure decaying. And just there was no real expansion by the government that took over. They just lived off the old systems that the white apartheid government had built. But now you had millions more people flocking into every city and town, and so the infrastructure simply wasn't enough to handle that influx of population. So yeah, everything's just deteriorating, and now it's at the point where, I mean, you can't trust the water that comes out of your tap in pretty much any city or town. Our beaches are filthy unless it's in an area that's predominantly white. So yeah, we've definitely noticed it. Like, I mean, I grew up in the late 80s and early 90s. So I was born in the early 80s. So I saw the end of apartheid. and what our beaches, towns, and cities look like. And yeah, for anyone born after that time, you simply have no comparison. You don't know how beautiful, clean, and safe old South Africa was versus the new democratic, multicultural South Africa.
Yeah, that's pretty shocking. Yeah.
Yeah.
And are there like some efforts like there's still like 5 or 6 million, I think, Afrikaans speaking or mostly white people living
Yeah.
there, right? And
Yeah.
and you are like the biggest tax base, really. I feel like I figured like that group pays most into the tax system that the black government depends on. But what do they use all that money for? What are if they're not maintaining things, they're not building infrastructure, then what's really the expenditure of your government? Is it like just welfare or something, or?
It's a big portion of it is welfare. That's how they get their votes. So we have a similar system to what they have in the US, the EBT system, right? The social grant system. So a massive portion of the black population relies on that for their food every month.
Mhm.
And this in turn gets the ANC their votes every election year again. So yeah, the blacks will vote for the ANC. Doesn't matter how poorly they run things and how much they fail at everything else, because they make sure to keep this social grant system going, even though the country can't really afford it. But yeah, a major portion of the money is also looted. So we have massive fraud and corruption in our country. And you'll see the political party and all their families and friends basically enriching themselves ridiculously with stolen funds. We have a commission of inquiry every second month that never really results in anything. It just kind of highlights who all these Africans are that are stealing all the money, but nothing ever happens to them. So yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think you and the other Johannes, South African Johannes, you have like some
Yeah.
sort of organization trying to get members into. Could you describe a little bit about what you guys are doing to what your goals are or so?
Yeah. So we our movement's called the Vryburgers, which it's basically translates in English to the free citizens. It's named after some of the Dutch that moved here originally. They went by die Vryburgers, the free
Oh,
citizens,
wow.
at a stage when they wanted to get out from the colonial rule of the Dutch East India Company.
Wow.
So we named ourselves after them, and yeah, so our organization's basically trying to just instill the political will amongst whites in South Africa to reclaim our nation. We know it's not necessarily going to happen democratically, but we have to fight politically for it nonetheless. So we have to engage in radical politics. We have to start working on our people again, moralizing them again. And we also want to start creating exclusive industries for our people again, where we just trade amongst our own and only employ our own as labor, etc. We want to concentrate on farming projects, for instance, where we can resettle some young white men and women who want to move out of the cities, which are, yeah, just falling apart as time goes on, and resettle them on the rural countryside, as that is the history of our people really in South Africa. The majority of the population were always rural people living in a farming kind of sedentary life.
Right. So yeah, but then you have to have own the land really, and I think your government, the ANC, and so on, they're gonna try to strip the land from you. So that's going to be a bit of a fight then. If you really want to settle outside of the cities, you're going to have to fight whoever wants to drive you off it again, right?
Yeah, definitely. Look, at the moment, our we still have property rights. Obviously, the government is working at taking that away. But I believe they are kind of being slow about it because they know there's a big chance there may be a civil war if they do actually try and take whites' property. So yeah, it could. If so, a lot of whites in South Africa are of the opinion that that would actually be our quickest route to freedom. Is if the Africans are actually foolish enough to try and take white property, that would create a very volatile situation where whites would actually unite and stand up against, with their fellow kinsmen against the Africans and the African government.
Right,
But
because you're like the tax
yeah,
base. So to what extent could they, if they attack you, it's going to cost them because you would stop paying taxes.
yeah. Not just that. It's also the military capability of our government, the police force, etc. It's ridiculous. So it's
Oh,
gone
really?
completely to African standards. Yeah, yeah. I mean, South Africa used to have one of the top militaries in the world, especially because we were so engaged in the border war in Angola and Southwest Africa or Namibia. So we had one of the top militaries in the world. We had weapons and arms manufacturers in South Africa. We had a top quality air force, navy, etc. But everything has now gone to ruin. So yeah, our military is a joke. They can't even engage in warfare. They went to go lend support to Rwanda, and they they got a hiding from the Congolese there, I believe. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's I don't think the South African government in any military or policing capacity is a threat to the white population. The white population is very well armed in South Africa as well, generally well trained. So yeah, it would actually be extremely foolish of the government and the African population to go that route.
Right. You are all allowed to have guns in South Africa, I suppose.
Yeah, they have made it a lot more difficult to have your guns. Under apartheid South Africa, every man who served in the military would get his rifle that he served in the military with, and you could have unlimited arms basically. But since the new government came in, they have been limiting arms more and more. So, but yeah, we can still get most weapons. Yeah.
Right, right. I often hear stories like from Black people, African people in my comments under my videos. Some of them they like threaten to like, oh, we're going to colonize Europe. It makes me chuckle a little bit because I told you I was in Hamburg recently, and there was this one of these bad streets next to the central station. It was a big black man who called me the N word. So it was funny, but then he was a pimp to his women, and they were all like Bantu black women who are basically the street prostitutes in those areas. They're not colonizing us. The blacks that come to the West, by and large, are cooks and cleaners, like paid laborers, but
Yep.
nowhere near the kings and conquerors that they wish they were. Like, I wonder, like, do you speak to the black people in South Africa? It's like, do they have what kind of idea do they have about their status or about relative to Europe or so? Like, do you think they're gonna take over or something?
They absolutely believe every bit of Wakandan propaganda that comes their way. So I don't know. It seems like black people worldwide operate as this collective kind of hive mind. The moment a new piece of history gets made up for them, they all just adopt it. Like our black people will tell you as well that they were the Egyptians. They civilized us Europeans, taught us how to do mathematics, etc. So yeah, they absolutely have this hyperinflated sense of self. Um,
Right.
yeah, so they view it the same. Yeah, definitely. It's
Right.
it's
Right.
it's pretty
Okay.
much the same amongst black people worldwide. I would say whether they're in the US, in Africa, or in Europe, it's same
Right.
attitude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I would say indeed it's sort of like an inflated ego. But then of
Yeah,
course,
it's
yeah, when they're
yeah,
confronted with reality, then it's a painful experience for them, I suppose.
yeah. Well, that's why I've probably been banned 32 or 33 times this year so far because I
Oh,
just I just I just poke fun at them and they can't handle that. But yeah, it's
yeah.
I think it's an inferiority complex, you know.
Yes.
It's
Um,
inferiority trying to overcompensate by projecting superiority.
right. That's yeah. Because of course they at least they tell each other about the myth of the white man coming to Africa, and they feel humiliated, right? And they want to somehow compensate for it. But the way to do it would be to build factories and build technology. But that's not
Yeah.
what they do, right?
No, no, the way they do it is just making up history as they go along.
Yeah, that's not
There's
very
no
helpful.
actual Yeah, there's no actual accomplishment in the modern day to back what they're saying. So yeah.
Yeah. Are you guys like your organization, this Vryburger Beweging? Do you have like some good growth going on? Like, are there like enough people joining and so on, or do you feel like there's more and more people waking up to it that they need this kind of organization?
Yeah, definitely. We have in more recent times seen more people joining the organization. So I think um, it's as people are exposed to the black rhetoric more and more and the anti-white narrative. I think that's waking people up. Like at the end of the day, people like myself or the Johannes here from South Africa, our videos, I'm sure, have an impact of some sort, but the biggest impact will always be something like a Black Lives Matter rally, or we had riots here in South Africa where black people just looted stores en masse. Something like that does a lot more to the white man's consciousness and his psyche and wakes him up to the racial realities of life a lot more than someone like myself or Johannes or something like that ever will. So yeah.
Right, right. So indeed, we had recently. I was on your live for a briefly talking about this attack in the England, right, on the LNER train, where apparently a man shouting certain religious phrases attacked 11 people or stabbed 11 people. But the response is, yeah, the media totally ignored the fact that this guy was, Caribbean black type, right? And he's
Yeah.
like likely Islamic. And I got 3 strikes on this account because I was just talking about facts that I read about in the mainstream media. If you can't even discuss facts, well, no wonder such a large group of, say, normie white people don't know what's going on. The media don't tell them. How do you guys get access to like proper information? Like, do you have your own channels and so on?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's pretty much the same. Yeah, the media for the most part is extremely leftist. They'll do the same thing. So there are independent organizations that keep some stats like on farm attacks, etc. Because the our police, number one, are um, completely useless. So you can't really get reliable statistics from them. But also, they won't tell you the statistics broken down by race, etc. So yeah, there are private organizations that keep some of these statistics, like crime statistics, etc., where we can get some of the information from. But yeah, for the most part, it's a similar thing to what you experience in Europe. They'll be quick to announce if a crime was committed by a white man, but they'll try to hide the identity of anyone from another race committing crime as long as they possibly can.
Uh, I thought maybe we could get one more guest on if you're all right with that. I think Seth. I think he was also on your live stream. I
Yeah,
wonder if
yeah,
I.
I know Seth. Yeah, he's
Yeah,
he's a good guy.
yeah. Seth, if you can hear me, maybe you can send us. I'm following you back now. Let's see if I can add him if he wants to come on. I don't know for sure if he wants to, but otherwise, let's see if he's available. Oh, here he is.
Yeah, hey, how's it going,
Hi,
guys?
Seth. I saw you've been listening in the whole time, I suppose.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not sure I have too much to say at the moment, but it's been a great live. Yeah,
Yeah, it's okay. It's like you are from the USA, I think.
yeah, New Jersey. Yeah,
New Jersey. Oh wow, that's a crazy diverse hotspot, I suppose. I remember a friend of mine once there. She was actually a normie, but totally blown away by the weirdness of people living in New Jersey. Would you describe a little bit maybe how life is like there?
yeah. Well, New Jersey is a very interesting place. It's very divided. Like it depends on the area that you go into. My area is like this tiny little desert white island that's like really high trust, and you go just outside of it, and there's literally immigrants from every part of the globe here, and the demographics are crap, and I think Newark has a higher unaliving rate than like Chicago. But literally,
Really?
like you'll meet, yes, yeah, it's very dangerous.
It
Um,
sounds like you're living in a sort of South Africa. So I think in South Africa you also have like these white enclaves in their own towns and so on. But you venture out, then it's just dangerous, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I live in like a really rural corner of it, but you drive 40 minutes to like a town like Dover, and it's like 9 out of 10 are Hispanic. It's like, what the flip happened to our cities? They're literally just like we've totally lost them in certain areas. Like really, genuinely, like the demographics are horrible.
Yeah. Uh, I think you had elections recently in New York City. Did I think the guy Mohammed Zamdani or something like it? He won the elections, and what's it like there? That if at this point minorities are taking over your politics?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I can't say what I know, if I know too much about it. I try not to
Uh-huh.
like get too involved in local politics. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, it's true. Actually, my state is one of the most locally politically it is the most politically competitive state in the United States
Yeah.
for local elections. I don't know if that has something to do with the demographics, but yeah.
Right. And like I feel that a lot of it's it's of course you have a lot of leftist men, of course, who vote for these super Democrat candidates. But do you feel that it's more like a rift between men and women, that the women are moving further to the left and the men are not? Do you also have this experience in your area?
Um, Yeah, I would say to some extent, and like I was mentioning before, New Jersey in particular is a very divided state. So there are a number of like right-wing counties, and then there's a number of very densely populated, very leftist counties. And so you'll meet like a lot of like hardcore leftists, and then in my area, like a bunch of like sort of normal like right-wing people. But yeah, I mean, especially nowadays with if you adjust for age demographics like Gen Z, um, the difference between right wing young men and left wing young women is growing at a very fast rate. Yeah.
Yeah, we also have this in the Netherlands. We had elections recently. I spoke a little bit about it on the last live stream with Daniel Clark, but yeah, we're going to get like now an openly homosexual prime minister with Indonesian roots and so on. And it's almost as though because of that, because he's a bit tanned, a bit dark skinned, they put him on a pedestal as though he's like this our savior, right? They want to make us basically submit to this idea of like global diversity, and I think that's a bit you know how they play the game. They want to make themselves look like they're almost religious saviors, whereas white people are just considered stupid or something, right?
Yeah, it's like this attitude is like, oh, if we can just get this one one more person of color into politics, this will solve all of our, racism issues and a white, how do they say this, systemic, prejudice or privilege. And yeah, a lot of people here give into that kind of like psyche where it's like, yeah, if anything, the far right is actually like less racist because we can actually understand that a person of another race could theoretically be a good or bad politician versus the leftists. They're like, no, this will be a good politician because of the race. Do you see what I'm saying? No, not. And
Yeah.
I mean, I am like a white separatist, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Uh, Daniel, have you ever been to the USA? Or?
No, no, not yet. No, I've traveled Europe a bit, but never been to the USA.
Yeah. Where have you been in Europe?
Well, I was in the UK, so I went to England, Scotland, Ireland. I was in Amsterdam for a couple of days, and yeah, that's it.
What was your impression of the crowds over here? Is it better than in South Africa, or even or getting worse?
Yeah, well, I was there a long time ago, so I was in England and Amsterdam in those areas in 2002, 2003. So I think it was before a lot of the demographic changes, etc., had started happening. So yeah, at that stage it was great for me. It was very interesting. The people are, yeah, I saw them as very. So I feel like then already your population was extremely left in their mindset,
Mhm.
leftist. The demographic replacement just hadn't started happening yet, but people seemed very liberal then from my perspective as a South African, because most of our white population at that stage were still very right wing, I would say.
Yeah. So by comparison, I also always got the impression, yeah, that the Afrikaner people are like would be considered right wing compared to the people in the Netherlands. I think we take too much for granted. Like people are not really thinking about that Europe could turn into something like South Africa. Like imagine the minority groups are put in power politically, right?
Yeah.
And through
Yeah,
let's
well,
say
I think
yeah.
a big issue was probably that you guys didn't have the exposure to it yet, right?
Yeah.
So it's easy to think that people from all races are equal if you don't have to live next door to them. But as
Yeah.
soon as you have them in proximity to you, it becomes pretty clear that we are vastly different from each other, and it might be a good idea if we kind of keep separate a bit. And I believe Europe is now starting to realize that to one degree or another. A lot of people who would have been very leftist in their views 10, 15 years ago are now considered far right.
Yeah. It it's so strange. You feel like the people with the money, the people with the power, they impose a lot of this onto us, even though even average normie people don't like the situation at all. And we're not given a choice in this. So that's why I feel like even our elections aren't really legitimate because um, it turns out 70% of the Dutch people recently voted for a right wing party, but the left wing party now so-called won the election and is going to get to supply us with the prime minister. So there's a lot of trickery going on behind the scenes to make sure that the globalist project continues, and we're not really allowed to change much about that, right?
Yeah.
I think I saw the other Johannes also in the comments. I don't know if he wants to come on, if he likes to have a little chat, or
Yeah, I'm sure he would like to come on. He's always got some good input.
let me see if I can see her. So if if South African Johannes can see, if you want to come on, have a little chat or talk a little bit about your organization or something. If you want to come on. Oh yeah, he wants to come on. Cool.
Yeah.
Johannes, do you mind if I comment?
Yeah, sure.
Something I have noticed in regards to the political affiliations of like Gen Z men and women is that I do noticeably see the women sort of falling in line. Now, I don't think we're there yet, but I
Mhm.
do see like a marked amount of like Gen Z women that are um, accepting a lot of right wing, like far right wing, whatever you want to call it, principles far easier than I have, ever could have expected. So I do see that them like following the men, but I think there's a bit of a lag between the two, if that makes sense. Oh, and
Right, because I suppose most white women, even in New Jersey, will end up dating or marrying white men, right? So it's not like they hate you that much. The battle of the sexes is real, but it's not that extreme. I'd say when the men take the lead, yeah, I suppose the women will have to follow, right?
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
also, in terms of some of your goals, I'll contact you later about it. But I have been thinking about some of your goals that you've mentioned before. I think I might have a couple ideas to chat with you about.
Oh, cool. Yeah. No, go ahead. Yeah. Uh, but let's introduce for a moment South African Johannes. You just got on. Um, maybe you'd like to. I think you're running this organization in South Africa, like the Vryburger Beweging. We just spoke a little bit about it. Maybe you want to also give us a bit like the overview of what you're trying to do or trying to achieve.
Good evening, Johannes, Daniel, and Seth. It is an honor to be joined by you or on your show, Johannes.
Yeah. No problem.
Yeah, the Vryburger movement, we got together as a bunch of friends in 2021. Our main goal, we are a white nationalist organization, and our first goal is to fight the narrative war in South Africa, meta politics, in terms of creating in our people a political will, which has been completely absent for the past 30 years, I think it's very, very important to first communicate to your people where you want to go before you say how you want to do it, and so our people are so demoralized at this point that I do not even think they feel in their hearts, they feel this is their country, they know this is their country, they belong here, but they cannot bring themselves to say it or to defend that in public. So that is what I aim to do with the organization, myself and Daniel. That's why we say it on a public forums, on any mediums that we can, so that we can attract scrutiny for it and then stand behind our words amidst persecution or scrutiny or whatever, so that that can inspire a spirit in our people to do the same thing. Ultimately, I believe that it begins with us speaking to the things we want to see in life. A political speak is indicative of political will. So often, or for so long in South Africa, we had to hear that we cannot say this, or we have to put things in this way or that way, otherwise we'll get into trouble. And we are here to say, no, to hell with getting into trouble. We are going to say what we want from the future and hopefully inspire in our people a willingness to act on that.
Right. That's a very noble goal. Yeah. Have you guys gotten into trouble with authorities? Are you being cracked down, or are they watching you? Do you think?
Johannes personally actually has Johannes. I don't know if you want to share your story of not being allowed in Germany.
I guess in 2000, when was that? 2022 or yeah, I think it's 2022. We did a stunt in front of a hoërskool Rustenburg, which is a high school in a town known as Rustenburg, where there were the head learners in the school sang the song Erika and they did the Roman salute, right? Because they are from a German community. It's a real German community in South Africa. There's even the boards, die padaanwysings, die padtekens, are even in German, you know? So it's a very close-knit German community, and oftentimes with Germans, or what I've seen is that they tend to be a little bit more nationalistic outside of Germany than they are inside Germany, because there's not real repercussions for them, right? But if you say these things in Germany, you'll probably get into very, very big trouble. But anyway, so then the Jewish Board of Deputies sent these children on a Holocaust memorial trip to show them how, you know, evil they were for singing Erika.
Okay.
And daring to be proud of themselves. And myself and the boys, we went there, we did a speech. And after that, you know, we got a lot of attention. The
media.
The coordinator for AfriForum, which is a civil rights organization in South Africa, basically the rebranded Nasionale Partij, I believe. Their security coordinator wrote a smear piece on me on his social media. All of the country's newspapers published the story. We were probably the first right-wing organization in probably 20 years to be reported on, you know, like this. And it sent all of these controlled opposition groups into an absolute meltdown. And after this, with my activism and so on, we got put on the track terror list. I was, after this stunt, banned from entering Germany. The German embassy, you know, made a, how do you say, declaration saying that, or a statement that I am permanently banned, as well as my political views from Germany. They distance themselves, blah, blah, blah. And then also the South African authorities, the guy that locked up the Boeremag is, I don't know if the investigation is still pending or whatever, but they investigated me for terrorism, apparently, you know. For just
I've had such an experience
starting this political movement.
Go ahead.
No, sorry, Johannes. Yeah, just for starting a movement and doing white advocacy, they investigate you for terrorism. Apparently, it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah. I had a similar experience last year where they also accused me of like something like sedition or so, or with a terrorist hallmark. It was totally overblown. The authorities, I think they're solid in power, but somehow they feel apparently deeply insecure about one or two guys saying things that they don't like to hear. Right? That's a real crackdown on certain political beliefs, even if it's just a small group of like a few people, and then they're terrified. Why do you think that is? Is it so? Do you think you could have enough influence to actually make a difference?
Well, yes, they fear the revitalization of the national spirit. So everything, all their propaganda, according to me, is geared towards demoralizing us and trying to convince us that what we have, who we are, what is ours is not worth fighting for. It's not worth dying for. It's not worth fighting for. They present our women as being these whores, you know, and therefore we should not care about our women, and we should just, you know, let them go and let them be. They create the idea that, you know, your life and money is worth more than a piece of land, where in fact, you know, a piece of land is actual tangible wealth. If you attain money, what are you going to do with it? You're going to want to buy yourself a house or home. You're going to want to buy yourself a piece of land where you can raise a family and be in nature. but they sort of convince you that these abstract things have value, but the real tangible things don't. So if we can invigor or reinvigor the national spirit, which is one of defiance, relentlessness, then that's a big problem for them, because people are drawn to courage. Courage inspires people, and when one guy, it's sort of like when we were young, right, and we would go swimming. The one guy would say, okay, let's jump off the cliff into the river. And everybody would be hesitant. Everybody would want to do it. And the first guy that does it inspires everybody else to do it. So it's a simple way of explaining it, I think, but I think that's what they fear. They know what lives in us better than what we know what lives in us at this point.
Right. I always sort of thought the same way. Like they seem to know things about us, like these globalist organizers, that they know what to look for in us that we are not quite aware of yet, but we are waking up, and that's of course going to be a big threat to them. I saw a while ago a video of you, a very well produced video about the infrastructure in South Africa. I think you were showing some bridges and so on. Could you tell us a little bit about this project? It seems that you put a lot of time into it.
Yes, so thank you. So we traveled the country 6,000 kilometers almost. Oh man.
Right, is everything all right? I think Johannes, are you back?
Yes, I am back. Okay, so thanks, Johannes. Yes, so unfortunately, we are a little bit understaffed or undermanned, and producing this quality of video material takes a lot of time, obviously. But there's still a lot more to come, and great footage. But we did a 6,000 kilometer tour through the country. And the whole idea is to show people, that they can see with their own eyes things that we, for instance, just accept as normal and everyday life. Like if you drive on a highway in South Africa, there are loopbrug. Wat sal 'n loopbrug wees? Walkways? Yeah, walkways that go over for pedestrians that go over the highway. And these, because there are blacks, or where the blacks live, they have to build steel cages over these bridges so that the blacks do not actually unalive people by throwing cinder blocks or any kind of objects to the passing traffic, and it kills many people each year. And these steel cages, I shit you not, Johannes, literal steel cages, they pry it open. God knows how they do it, because they do not have the technology of Jacob's sons to aid them. They only have primal instincts, but it serves them well, and it works for them. So the entire aim of the project was to show people, that the infrastructure that there is. So often they say that South Africa is not the white people's country, etc. But if we just show you the infrastructure, you'll see that it's nothing different than it's similar to Europe, because it's Europeans that built it. And we also show how they changed our town names. We also show how they vandalize our monuments. And we do a couple of metaphorical videos. The last video that was published was about a town in East Transvaal. This town's known as Pilgrim's Rest, and it was a little mining town. Now, it's actually funny because the people over there from Tel Aviv, they have been plundering this country's mineral wealth for hundreds and hundreds of years. They're the ones that are responsible for the first and the Second Anglo-Boer War. There's a guy, Stephen Mitford Goodson, he wrote a book about it, The History of the Boers. It's a great book. You really should read it. It's not long. It goes into detail explaining these things. And then, in this town, you see a bunch of illegal black miners. So they are next to the road, digging mining trenches and whatnot, and they get the police, the literal police force of South Africa, to pick the gold up for them and to drive it around for them. So the police are the logistics wing of this illegal mining network that they've got going. So South Africa's police force is entirely just there to police white people's behavior. And in 2020, we actually had this instance where we almost had a civil war, because a white guy, and this you'll find interesting, a white kid of 21 years old was killed. But when they told people the story of how he died, it almost ignited an irreversible race war in South Africa, because all of his bones in his hands were broken as he fought back. Now, usually, or more often than not, my people are so intimidated that they don't fight back, because it's like the jab that people had. They know that they're going to get a lethal injection, yet they are so afraid of the ostracization, of the legal ramifications, that they will rather get a literal lethal injection than say, no, I'm not doing this. So we see the same pattern where our people don't want to fight back with physical force on a lot of these attacks because they are afraid of getting in trouble. And this guy, he actually fought back, showing courage, and that inspired and ignited in our people the willingness to want to fight. So, yeah.
Right. So a lot of the, say, normie average people, they do have like a potential to fight back, but they're just too hesitant or just too passive to think of it. So you need to have like the first one who dares to do it to show the example. And then this may spread, basically. Is that your goal with your organization? You want to like energize people, like empower people, as you would say, to stand up for the Afrikaner people?
100%, it's our goals, our stated goals are awaken the people, rebuild the people, free the people, So we are in that phase where we still have to awaken people from their slumber. So people are in this absolute, as you can see in your own life and in Europe, people are in this autopilot mode. They don't think about what is going on around them in any capacity. So now what we do is we want to take control of the narratives, because everything is so narrative driven. For instance, before I got married, all the boomers would tell us, oh, don't get married, go around, sleep around, live your life, enjoy your life, which is very antithetical to enjoying life. Sleeping around and being hedonistic is the opposite of enjoying your life, because you are actually sabotaging yourself. You are sabotaging the men and women in your community. You are making women distrustful of men. You are making men distrustful of other men and distrustful of women. So you're doing this absolutely filthy, vile thing, but it is now presented as this awesome thing. So what we are saying to people is, hey, stop being a degenerate, get married, have a family, don't have one child, don't have two children, because they'll tell us, oh no. And there's this one example that always sticks with me it just sort of highlights how a lot of the things that we say are not our own ideas. We just repeat it, And I'm not speaking about yourself or myself, or at least I, for a very long time, also fell prey to this. But we just repeat a lot of things that we heard from our community. And there's this guy, he's wealthy, super wealthy, married to a gorgeous woman, and they got divorced after 2 years of marriage. Why did they get divorced? Because he said he could not afford. This guy is a millionaire. He can't afford a child, you see? So we're kind of here to revolutionize the way that our people think in a counterculture kind of way, So have more children, abandon hedonism, take up your language, learn to say that this language is our language. It's not the coloreds. They don't have any part of this language. It's our country. We will fight for it if we need to fight for it. Instilling that kind of values in our people, and then organizing locally.
Right. I think that's exactly the right way to do it. Or, I wanted to ask Seth if he's still listening. If he
Yes.
could tell a little bit about in the U.S. Do you also have like these kind of organizations like the what's it called, the Patriots?
Patriot
What's it
Front.
called? Yeah, Patriot Front and others. Or do you think, are they legitimate, and do you think they're gonna also push for these kinds of values in the USA, like telling white people basically to just settle down, get married, get land, leave the cities, and so on? What do you think is like the overall theme over there in the US?
Well, personally, I'm not involved in any of the active clubs. I do find, at least from my research, Patriot Front to probably be the best. It's the most consistent. It's the most normal. Like some of these active clubs can kind of come off as very, very extreme, like almost like the I don't know if you're familiar with like the Blood Tribe.
I've
Are you
heard
familiar with that? Yeah, it's just like a really, really extreme and like sometimes violent when they shouldn't be. Type of clubs versus a club like Patriot Front is very consistent. They know what they want. They're United States, or at least lower 48 wide. They do advocate for a lot of these good principles. But yeah, it's there's some here, but I'm not personally involved with them.
Yeah. Here in the Netherlands, I would say there's sort of spin-offs like it from the active clubs. They have like local names. They have like Telegram groups with like 100 followers or so. They're not super active, but once in a while you'll have like some member is arrested, for example, on a suspicion of terrorism, and then when you find out what they actually did, it's just like more like a free speech problem. They did a hate speech somewhere, and it's considered almost terrorism. And I think you have a lot of these splinter groups, but yeah, the idea would be that they could start learning from each other. Can we somehow, figure out how to exchange ideas, like what works in the US, what works in South Africa, and yeah, I'm not saying that we should become globalists ourselves. I'm saying that we should have a way of working together, like. I don't know, maybe you just like to, Seth, maybe you'd like to just give your ideas about what you would like to achieve, or what would you like to see happen in the US to change things?
In my personal opinion, at this stage, the number one goals to accomplish that we can accomplish and start doing today is simply, just getting our own personal lives in order, becoming as prepared as possible. As you've talked about, Johannes, talking about, I remember in some of your older videos, you talked about how each person, you said something like, if you're so poor that you can't even buy shoes, go running then, you remember?
Yeah.
And then secondly is just the narrative war. People underestimate how impactful just one-on-one conversations can be. I literally just made an online friend on my personal Instagram probably 2.5 years ago that said, hey, synagogue is Satan, the small hat tribe. And I was like, what do you mean? And so he started, just this one random person that I met online that was just DMing. warmed me up and brought me to the knowledge of like the JQ and some of these things. And then I've sort of spread some of those messages to some of my family members. So one, it's win the narrative war. Something that Daniel talks about a lot is that we need to project strength, and then just convert people in our own individual lives and get our own personal lives in order. And then on top of that, probably get active if you have a good organization like the Vryburgers or the or Patriot Front or something like that.
Yeah, I think for a lot of these groups, funding and fundraising is also going to be an issue. Like you need to learn to keep your bank accounts, for example. You would like to have more money, like Johannes was talking about making these documentaries. All that stuff costs a lot of time and some money, of course. I think by and large, the sort of groups we would represent have to learn to do a lot in secret as well, like offline, like meeting, face to face, in person, and so on, to discuss things. Because if you're on Telegram or something, or WhatsApp groups, all of that is filtered out now with the AI bots. They're reading all your messages. Even here on the TikTok comments, I suppose they read everything. So they profile you without you even knowing about it. And I suppose all of us here are already flagged as, suspicious people, right? So I think, communication offline it's difficult, but it has some value in that you can really start thinking about planning to do things, which I would not recommend discussing anywhere on the internet because, it causes trouble. I don't know if any of the guests want to comment on this, on like how to move forward as such organizations in terms of growing and funding and communications or so.
Yeah, Johannes, I'll just make a quick comment here. Obviously you don't want to be discussing any ridiculous things on social media that could get you into a lot of trouble. But one strategy that I think is probably one of the best ways to approach this censorship and policing is to try rally more to the cause. So in other words, if it's myself and Johannes, for instance, speaking up here in South Africa, we are easy to police. We are two men. But if we can get thousands of men to start speaking, saying the same words, it becomes something that's unpoliceable. So that's another way we could go, is try to engage in the strategy of rallying so many to our cause that it really becomes unpoliceable for any authorities. That's just kind of the way I would say it. Other than we have to get together physically as well and meet up and talk in person, and obviously always be cautious of what you say on any social media platform. But in terms of whites rallying behind our white identity, our people, that is something that I think needs to become kind of a mass influence thing that's spread amongst our people, and then it becomes unpoliceable. Like at the moment in the UK, for instance, they have thousands of arrests every year for people saying some of the most mundane things that is viewed as hate speech. But if they have millions of white folk in the UK saying the same thing, it becomes unpoliceable.
Right. If it's only a few people, though, this is crazy in the United Kingdom. Yeah, I made a lot of videos about that because it's across the North Sea from where I live, of course. It's so dystopian. It's like North Korea at this point. They throw thousands of people a year in jail, even for mere criticism, mere complaints that are factually true, but people don't like that. Maybe Johannes also wants to add a little bit about how to. I guess you have some experience organizing these kinds of groups. How do you do the communication, and what's your recommendation if you're still there?
Well, I can say only what there are people here that are listening that, I wouldn't want to say that publicly, but what you can communicate privately, something that you should do. We are also working on building our own networks. do not use the applications of the enemy to exchange ideas on, you know? So we are building our own infrastructure. I think ultimately that is the way. That is the difficult thing to do, the almost impossible thing to do, but that is the only viable way that I see it. You know, we're going to have to build our own thing if we're going to want to have, you know, a measure of safety. And then obviously the more important stuff, you communicate it in your organization, and you have to have profilers in your organization, right? You can't just tell everybody everything and trust everybody, right? So you have to be wise when it comes to managing people. Now, I do want to ask you a question, but I'll first comment on, you know, the way forward, if you don't mind.
All right.
So I believe South Africa should play this spiritual role in the white identitarianism. The reason I say that is I think that, you know, nationalism sprouted from the unification of different tribes. Is that correct?
Yeah, I suppose in contact with different groups, you start seeing each other's differences. You have like your own identity, and it's just the normal response to seeing other people, I suppose.
Yeah. So what I mean by it, but if you look at, for instance, Otto von Bismarck, Germany became this nation, this state, by forcing different tribes to work together against their will sometimes, you know? Where now what we are seeing is, because of this loss of our countries, for all intents and purposes, we are seeing a large fragmentation of white populations, you know? The Dutch identity, the German identity, the Afrikaner identity is not as strong as it was 50 years ago, maybe, you know? So I believe the way forward for us is, instead of trying to fix this in each and every one of our individual countries, we must go a step above. We must pursue white nationalism, that international nationhood, which aligns and focuses with laser focus on unification on a racial basis. And it's listen, there's a lot of things to address. There's a lot of things that are wrong, and we're going to need political focus. Now, the role that South Africa plays in this is, we are like a prophet, right? You don't convince people of racism by telling them, hey, you know, black people are not clever. Because people are like, no, people are individuals, blah, blah, blah. But if you introduce them to black behavior, then they come to the conclusion before you can even end your sentence. Okay?
I see, yeah.
So if we can show people what happens when you surrender your power structures to non-whites, then that would send a national revival across the West faster than anything, I believe, you know? And we don't need to, that's why I detest this whole thing about, oh, look at Palestine, and we should be showing people how evil the Jays are in their treatment of the Palestinians. No, show them what is happening. Fight the Jays by fighting forced integration. Their weapon against us is non-racialism, multiracialism. That is how they destroy us. We defeat them by attacking their weapon, not by attacking them directly. Because when we attack their weapon, non-racialism, multiracialism, by becoming overtly quote-unquote racist or race realists, then they will come out to defend their weapon and saying, oh, no, you shouldn't do that. And they will expose themselves. And people will sort of learn, you know. That's how I see it. But my question for you is, there's this guy that I see, I don't know if he's from the Netherlands, Dries van, what's his name? Dries
Dries van Langenhoven?
Yes. What do you think about that guy?
I think he's from Flanders, like North Belgium. Yeah, that's south of the Netherlands. I think he has. I like most of such people's messages, but I'm not sure what his stance is on Israel because I think a lot of these people are a lot of right-wing people in the Netherlands and so on. They support Israel. See, so that's why I find it a bit difficult to navigate who to connect over here because in the Netherlands, the leftist parties they support Palestine, the right wing parties they support Israel as standard. Same in Flanders. Yeah, I do like Dries van Langenhoven. He was recently convicted also because there were people in his Telegram group posting Hitler memes, and they blamed him for it because he was the moderator or the administrator of the channel, and they say that you didn't do enough about it to censor these kind of memes. So he got like almost a year. I think if he I don't know if he has to go to prison for real, but they sentenced him for something. And so yeah, the governments over here tend to be very leftist, and they will attack even the controlled opposition, say pro-Israel right wingers. But yeah, what do you think of him? Have you seen his content?
I've seen some of his content, and I must say I like what I see, but I am a very paranoid or pessimistic guy when it comes to come to these personalities. What is interesting that I want to tell you about South Africa is we've got the exact same laws regarding hate speech in South Africa, but the government is reluctant in enforcing it because if they enforce that kind of laws, then they might just rally people, So they have to constantly walk on eggshells. It also shows you something about democracy. Democracy. We are taught, power resides with the majority of the will of the people and all of that nonsense. But yet we are less than 7%, and of that 7%, it is not a coherent, group of people that all agree, or a monolithic group of people that all agree on the same politics. Yet they are so afraid of antagonizing us to a point where a group of us would commit to an armed struggle that they have to actually police themselves and manage themselves in policing us to not, cross the line. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Okay, guys, I've been talking almost 1.5 hours now, so I'd like to wrap it up a little bit. I want to ask maybe the guests if you want to, if you have a website or something, you want something to promote, then I'd say maybe Daniel and then Johannes and then Seth. You can tell people if you want to, closing remarks or something.
Yeah, I'll go first. Thank you, Johannes. Thanks for a great chat. I see someone dropped our website there in the comments sections. If you guys are interested, you can just go look at the website there. But thank you to you, Johannes, for hosting the live. It was great chatting to you again and much appreciated.
All right. Thank you very much. Yeah. Johannes, also nice that you were here to explain about your movement and your efforts. I thought you had some very clever insights about getting people to have the experience, and then they will have the same conclusion, really. I thought that was really genius.
Thank you very much, Johannes. Like I said, it's you are a great inspiration to us. I really, a lot of us, there are people that I'd like to introduce you. One of the, how do you say, the leaders of the Boerenmacht, Dr. Mike de Tooy. I think you would, we should actually invite him to have a discussion with you one day. You would find it very interesting. But yeah, it's been good having a discussion with you, and keep up the great work, man. We will win. The future is white.
All right. Yes. All right. The future is white. Yeah. Thank you very much, Seth. If you're still here, you want to have some final words, something to say?
Yeah. In terms of a website to go to, I don't have one. Just go to the Vryburger movement, whichever website that was, and thereaction.org, you say?
Right. Yeah, I have set up this website for what I'm trying to do over here in Europe is sort of reactionary movement to basically push back against progress, liberalism, and so on. Right, more of like the moral part, or so, like the cultural part. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and if anybody listening to me wants to check out Johannes's Substack, you can DM me and I'll send you the link and everything like that. So I'm subscribed to his newsletters. I recommend
Oh,
them.
cool.
But yeah, the only thing I have to say, thanks for having
All
me.
right.
It's been a great discussion, and just know that everyone here on the panel and that's listening, you're all in my prayers, and I have a lot of hope for the future. Some dark
Okay.
days, but I think there's a wonderful, wonderful, great future ahead of us. So stay hopeful,
I hope
Much
so.
love.
Yeah. All right, guys. It's been an excellent discussion. I thought this was really useful. So I wish you all the best, and have a nice evening wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, likewise.
All right. Goodbye.